What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and I found a couple interesting things I wanted to chat about in relation to this idea of creating the Vikings East with the New York Jets. And by that, I mean, we know we're targeting Brian Flores, current Vikings defensive coordinator. And according to some sources, it looks like it may be a final decision between Brian Flores and Aaron Glenn. And of course, we're coming off the recent rumors of Aaron Glenn making the New York Jets his number one option if he receives an offer. So you have a little bit of a plot twist there, right? But when you think about the visuals of Brian Flores versus Aaron Glenn, you're kind of looking at like a carbon copy in many ways, right? I think one of the intriguing things about Aaron Glenn, for example, maybe that we haven't touched on before, is that Aaron Glenn has been getting some head coach looks for a couple of years now, dating back to 2021, and he didn't even really have an opportunity to call plays at that time yet. So I think when you look at it from that standpoint, many people have thought he had head coach qualities for a couple of years now, right? And really his recent success is really helping push things over the edge. You talk about his strong interview that he's had and all of those great things. With Brian Flores, you're kind of getting a potential sneak peek into Aaron Glenn's future, right? A guy that was a defensive specialist, also is coming off of leading a top tier Vikings defensive unit, and he already has head coach experience under his belt as well. Now, his baggage is a little bit different, right? You have a multitude of previous players that have come forth and talked about the culture, the environment that he kind of crafted that wasn't necessarily appreciated. And I don't know the inner workings of a lot of that. I haven't even paid a ton of attention to it. I do also know that many current Viking players call out Brian Flores as somebody they really love to work with. So you have a little bit of a clashing of ideas there, but I kind of liken it to our Keith Carter offensive line coach situation, where you had a lot of guys that were speaking about how they basically had to endure practice with them and how rough he was on them, and maybe some verbal abuse and stuff like that. Not to say that's the exact same situation as Brian Flores, but eerily similar, right? And so I think ultimately, if I look at Brian Flores versus Aaron Glenn, I think you have more question marks when you look at Brian Flores, even if his resume appeals a little bit more to you. You have the Tua Tagovailoa, not only the controversy around the pick, right? I believe what many people have put out there is that Flores wanted Herbert. He ended up getting Tua, and you got to make it work with what you end up having, right? But ultimately, it kind of feels like he derailed his career. Obviously, McDaniels comes in, and you see an emergence immediately from Tua. So maybe a little bit of stubbornness there, inability to want to kind of adapt to the talent that you're receiving. Also, some disparity between front office and coaching staff, maybe ownership in that case, right? And then, of course, you have this lawsuit that's also hanging over Brian Flores and the NFL at large over the discrimination stuff. So it's just really a lot of question marks, a lot of baggage, and Can he perform as a defensive coordinator / defensive head coach better than in Aaron Glenn? Significantly better, right? I don't know if I would say that is necessarily true, which also would make me want to lean towards an Aaron Glenn. But the point of this video wasn't necessarily to disparage Brian Flores or talk about, the negatives that potentially come with him or anything like that. He's a qualified finalist for a reason, and so I have just as many reasons, if not more, to talk about why we should be excited if he ends up becoming our next head coach, right? One of the big pieces is bringing over Josh McCown. I would assume an upgrade would be justly due here, right? He's moving on from a quarterback coach to potentially an offensive coordinator if he comes over with Brian Flores. And there's something you got to love, right? That same kind of feeling I get about the hometown hero Aaron Glenn returning to New York is Josh McCown was a really good quarterback for us, right? He was a great mentor, a great bridge QB, had his moments as a starter for us, and ultimately he just always felt like a guy that was a coach on the field, not necessarily in the same way Aaron Rodgers was. You can make the argument maybe even in better ways, right? But he was willing to take people under his wing, and he kind of understood where he was at in his career, what he had to offer, and you can't understate what the value he placed on turning around Sam Darnold's career, right? Even if his playoff game didn't go well, even if the last, couple weeks or so of their regular season wasn't great, 14 wins with Sam Darnold, career best numbers. Sam Darnold didn't just look like a efficient quarterback. I kind of liken him to Baker Mayfield and turnaround he's been able to make, right? He's going to give you potentially consistent above average play. He may never be able to go out and just outright beat out a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson or somebody like that. But if you have enough pieces around him, if you play enough mistake-free football, you could win a chip with Sam Darnold potentially based on the play that we saw this year. So he has that under his belt, which is a huge plus. And also, moving into that coordinator role, that doesn't mean he necessarily needs to lose that touch, but he even gets more influence over how he can decide to develop a quarterback, what kind of schemes and stuff does he really want to derive and put in play. And so I'll be really intrigued by this idea of him coming in. I know I've seen the Jets X Factor article as well, which I haven't been able to dive into the full thing, but it was really interesting from what I was able to read into a little bit, where they were making the case for Josh McCown potentially being a head coach in and of itself. With that said, though, the piece that really stuck out to me here was a tweet, or it was an article, and I couldn't find it again, but there's this idea that Grigson isn't necessarily a lock to be part of this trio, this conglomerate that will come to the New York Jets. The idea that was floated out there, and I don't remember if this was Rich Cimini or like an Albert Breer article, or again, who may have tweeted it, right, a Pelissero or somebody like that, but there was this sentiment thrown out there that Ryan Grigson may be trying to ride the coattails of Brian Flores and not necessarily the other way around. And depending on what shakes out with these secondary interviews for GM that happens with the New York Jets, that may be a strong indicator on what they want to do here, right? If Grigson is part of that interview process, then I would imagine they are comfortable enough taking all three of these guys. If he's not, then it would lead some credence to the fact that maybe they just want the Brian Flores, Josh McCown package, and then they look to pair him with maybe a better GM. And I know there's been some thoughts thrown out there that Brian Flores may not necessarily be on, this elite page mentally with Grigson as well. And also just putting it out there, this was a question that I raised before when the Grigson interview was announced, but seeing some of the sentiments that were thrown out there from what I'm discussing now, the league still may not be over what happened to Andrew Luck as a whole, right? Not only was he great for Indianapolis Colts football, but just the NFL product at large. He could have been a face of the NFL caliber player and stuff. So not only are you losing tons of money from a franchise, but NFL perspective, that impacted views and all these other things, but the GM that takes a potential generational quarterback talent and does such a woeful job that he's being sacked at record numbers year after year after year. And yes, you have some weapons and stuff in place, but if I remember correctly, I don't think Andrew Luck made it to his second contract. Before his rookie contract finishes, he's retiring because the damage has been so brutal on his body. I don't know how you recover from that if you're a GM, right? So, not to put the stake in his heart or anything like that, but that would be a huge question in my eyes, right? It's even more so for us as Jets fans because we hounded Joe Douglas for his inability to field a complete or even at least just acceptable level of play from his offensive line, and we seen the amount of resources he really tried to pour into this thing and just move after move after move never worked out. So ultimately, the name of the game is results, and that didn't get done for Joe Douglas, and it sure didn't get done for Grigson here. So Let me know what you guys ultimately think. Would you be comfortable taking that trio, Grigson, McCown, Flores, if that's your desired, new regime? Or would you prefer Brian Flores and Josh McCown, and then you do look to see if you can go ahead and lock in a Borgonzi or, any, Sullivan from Packers, etc., whatever other GM that fancies you. And if you do have any insight, if you can find the tweet or anything like that, let me know. I'm going to continue digging. If I can, I'll make sure I drop it in a video somewhere or something. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.